That's
Okay.
great.
Awesome.
Michuksas. Hello, everyone. Oyasat Sierra Olivia. I'm the ICADV prevention specialist, and I use NEI or she, her pronouns. NEI means that one in Northern Miwok dialect. And today I want to talk to you about why disability justice is integral to our sexual violence primary prevention program. And 95% of the artwork in this presentation was created by compensated disabled people and people with disabilities for the Disability Justice and Violence Prevention Resource Hub. And to practice accessibility today, I would describe myself, I would provide image descriptions, and I would read all the text in the slides, and I won't be able to do that, but I provide all of that information to you in the Google Drive. So I'm going to present everything today in seed form. And my plan for this 10 minutes is to touch on disability and disability justice, and then get into why and how ICADV uses disability justice in our sexual violence prevention. Next slide. So before I define disability justice, I want to talk about disability, because the public health approach is a medical model that frames disability through the lens of disease as something to be cured. Lydia X.C. Brown defines disability as having physical or mental impairments or differences while living in a society where their bodies and ways of thinking, communicating, sensing, or moving are not treated as normal or natural. And it's this discrimination that leads to ableism in laws, norms, policies, and structures. And ableism is a negative health predictor. And when we think of disabilities, we actually often imagine people with physical disabilities. However, many disabilities are considered invisible. I think about my disabilities as unseen or unrecognized because they are at the forefront of my experience, but I carry an enormous amount of unearned privilege because I can choose to mask most of the time. And disability justice works to end multiple forms of identity-based discrimination through a focus on ableism. And disability justice is intersectional in its approach, and it examines the ways in which power operates to disempower and oppress disabled and neurodivergent communities. And this is a necessary modification to the public health approach. So where do we implement disability justice frameworks within the public health approach? Next slide. The overarching strategy that we use from the Stop SV technical package is creating protective environments. The 4-step public health approach does not require us to start with an equity analysis. And while it does address violence perpetration, which is a key aspect of oppression, it is insufficient to address power in an oppressive society. It will not do that on its own. It is partially responsible for the status quo. So disability justice, though, specifically addresses the intersections of power and oppression at the roots of sexual violence. Protective environments are also a passive sexual violence prevention strategy once implemented. And what this means is they work automatically to protect everyone, requiring no cooperation or action on the part of the protected folks. So protective environments address the conditions that enable violence, ultimately making the desired behavior, which is equitable relationships, the easy behavior. So let's get into why we use protective environments and then identify some solutions. Next slide, please. People with disabilities experience some of the highest prevalence rates. Some sources estimate between 65 and 98% experience sexual violence across the lifespan. So creating protective environments are a necessary mitigation of one of the most dangerous risk factors for neurodivergent and disabled communities across the lifespan, and that's isolation. Isolation works to magnify exponentially the risks for sexual violence. And this is a tiny list, but I want to highlight the dignity of risk here. And my friend gave me permission to share this story with you. People with disabilities do not have the same freedoms to make decisions like enabled people, both good and bad decisions. I fell and broke my arm in January, and I sought medical treatment as soon as I could without any concern that a mandatory reporter would call Adult Protective Services with concerns about my capacity to care for myself. This is my unearned advantage working to protect me. So my friend with cerebral palsy who uses a power chair does not enjoy that privacy or safety. She fell twice last month and she chose not to seek medical care for the second time because she is at such high risk for mandatory reporting or being declared incapacitated and then institutionalized. And institutionalization itself is a risk factor for sexual violence, and that's that magnification effect. So my colleague does not have the dignity of risk to roll in her neighborhood as I have to walk in mine. She cannot access wellness and social support like I can. So safety is not distributed equally. It's a policy choice. So how do we intervene? Next slide, please. We center the relational protective factors of connectedness and social support, which protects against multiple forms of violence across the lifespan. And that is so, so important in a mass disabling event like COVID. And when we focus on improving relations with people with disabilities as leaders who are living in every community around the world, we make connectedness and social support robust, and we create passive protections for all the people. Connectedness is somewhat amoeba-like, so I want to give you a few nodes of connection. So when I think about this, I think about person to people, person to organization, person to community, and person to earth, and all of these beings in connection with each other. And it's in these places that we look for indicators of social support, like food access and security and language access, all of your basic social determinants of health. And so where can we get started today? Next slide, please. Focusing on equity and inclusion in every strategy is important, and it takes deliberate investment and redistribution of resources. And one way that ICADV practices this is we, in every incoming and outgoing budget, meaning like our grants and then our sub-grants, we expect and we include accessibility items like language access and accessible travel and compensation to people with disabilities to do this work. But it's really important for us to understand that this is a legal baseline. It doesn't create inclusion, but what it does do is it creates the invitation for connectedness and social support. And so what else might centering disability justice look like, and how can you get more information? Next slide. Founded in 2018 as an RPE project, the Indiana Disability Justice is a coalition led by 7 disabled and neurodivergent folks, including me. We created the Disability Justice and Violence Prevention Resource Hub to share all our work and increase leadership and representation of people with disabilities. The hub is the container for all of our violence prevention work, and it's free and available at indisabilityjustice.org. So there we offer free risk factor literature review, which the Michigan folks who are here are helping us to revise and make awesome and better. We also have more than 22 webinars and a YouTube channel organized and delivered by disabled and neurodivergent people. And over the last 2 years, we've been able to distribute more than $18,000 to neurodivergent and disabled people to create content for the hub, which you saw some of today. And if you sign up for our newsletter, you'll have access to content that's curated from the hub, events, webinars, resources from our favorite disability justice practitioners. And we offer free accessible evaluation, including the Sidewalks to Sexual Violence Prevention Guide to Social Inclusion. We have a sexual wellness community strengths and needs assessment, and we're about to publish the results of that. And we just released a free organizational evaluation tool, and we invite you to use this either privately with your organization, or you can join IDJ in a growing learning community. Next slide, please. So this is just a little bit of a description of this organizational evaluation tool. So there are 3 levels of engagement with us. And what you'll do is you'll take a look at the accessibility and accessible services in your organization. You'll identify opportunities to contribute to the prevention of violence against people with disabilities, and all the while really thinking about trauma-informed approaches to working with people with disabilities. And finally, I invite you to join me in my breakout session. You can ask me questions, and I have questions for you. Next slide, please. I want to ask, what are our barriers as individual programs and a national body to practicing disability justice in our prevention strategies and programs? And or what are our barriers to working with disabled people and communities? And how can we help each other address these barriers? If we have time, we'll identify the partners who we need to help further those goals of ours. And my contact information and everything is in the slides. Thank you so very much.